My name is Marin Holloway, and this is the story of the day I stopped being their daughter. It was the kind of summer day that clung to your skin like syrup, sticky, slow, and impossible to escape. The county fair was in full swing, a blur of veau. Neon lights, fried food, and the sharp screech of rides slicing through the July air. Kids screamed with delight. Vendors barked about funnel cakes and cotton candy. Somewhere in the distance, a cover band played Fleetwood Mac just off-key enough to be annoying. To anyone passing by, it was just another hot day in rural Tennessee. But for me, it was the last day I ever saw my parents the same way. I was 16, caught between the fragile confidence of adolescence and the deep, gnawing fear that I didn't quite belong anywhere. My parents, Douglas and Caroline, were picture-perfect on the outside. Smiles for church, politeness for neighbors, the kind of couple who brought casseroles to funerals. But behind closed doors, their love was conditional, sharp-edged, weaponized. They believed in raising a strong daughter, which, in their language, meant constant belittling disguised as motivation and punishment, masked as teachable moments. That day at the fair, they were in high spirits. Dad joked with the ticket guy while Mom smoothed her floral dress, pretending not to notice the way he kept glancing at other women. I trailed behind, holding on to the last threads of optimism that maybe, just maybe, today would be different. It wasn't. We'd just finished splitting a funnel cake, standing in the shade near the tilt-a-whirl, when Dad turned to me and said, "Hey, Marin, why don't you head over to the ticket booth and grab 3 waters? It's hotter than Hades out here." I nodded, grateful for a small task, something easy to get right. I jogged over, grabbed the bottles, and turned back, expecting to see them waiting by the bench. They weren't there. I scanned the crowds, a small knot tightening in my chest. Maybe they moved. Maybe they were trying to find more shade. I walked, in slow circles at first, still holding the waters, still hoping. After 10 minutes, I began to run. After 20, my hands started to shake. And after 30 minutes, when I finally pulled out my phone, I saw the message from Mom. "Let's see how long it takes her to find her way home." Think of it as a little independence test. My heart dropped. At first, I told myself it was a joke, that they'd be laughing nearby, maybe filming me for one of their twisted little life lesson stories. But then I called, straight to voicemail. I texted. No response. I sat on the grass behind the carousel, hidden from the crowds, and waited. And waited. And waited. They didn't come back. That night, as the fair shut down and the lights blinked off one by one, I was still there. Alone. With nothing but the cash in my back pocket from my part-time job at the local grocery store, and a heart that felt like it had cracked down the center. I bought a bottle of Sprite, sat on the edge of the parking lot, and called the only person I had left, my dad's estranged sister, Lorna, who hadn't spoken to my parents in over a decade. "Marin," she said when she picked up. "Is everything okay?" "No," I whispered. "They left me, at the fair." She drove 5 hours through the night to get me. When I climbed into her car, she didn't ask questions. She just reached across the center console, took my hand and said, "You never have to go back, not unless you want to." I never did. That was 20 years ago. Now, I'm 36, founder and CEO of a nonprofit that provides emergency housing for at-risk teens. I live in a high-rise in Atlanta, drink my coffee black, and spend my weekends running trail marathons and reading books about trauma-informed care. I built a life from nothing, no safety net, no family support, just grit, pain, and an unrelenting refusal to let their abandonment define me. But then, just a few weeks ago, my phone lit up with a name I hadn't seen in 2 decades. Caroline Holloway. My breath caught. I stared at the screen like it was a ghost, and then a voicemail popped up. I tapped it open, my pulse thudding in my ears. "Marin, sweetheart? It's your mother, We, we've heard about all the amazing things you're doing. Your father isn't well. We need your help. Please call us back." I froze. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I regret what we did." Not even, "We miss you." Just a need, a demand wrapped in false sweetness. I should have deleted the message and moved on, but I couldn't. Not yet. Because even after everything, there was still a flicker of something in my chest. Not hope, not love, but a question. What kind of people abandon their child as a joke, and then come crawling back only when they need something? And what happens when that child is no longer a scared girl sitting behind a carousel, but a woman who knows exactly who she is and how to make people listen? If this story is already pulling at something deep inside you, if you've ever been underestimated, erased, or told to toughen up by people who should have protected you, I want you to stick around. Because this isn't just about a cruel prank at a summer fair, it's about what comes next. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. You won't want to miss what happens when the ones who left you behind try to walk back into your life like nothing ever happened. Trust me, this is just the beginning. I didn't call them back. Not that day, not the next. I let the voicemail sit there like a loaded gun on my phone, daring me to touch it. I told myself I was just busy, that I didn't have time. But the truth? I was terrified. Not of them, but of who I used to become when they were in my life. Of the way my voice would shrink around them. How I'd smile just to keep the peace. How easily they could pull me back into being that girl at the county fair, waiting to be chosen, waiting to matter. Instead, I sat in my office with floor-to-ceiling glass windows that overlooked downtown Atlanta. I looked at my reflection in the glass, at the woman I'd fought like hell to become. Confident, accomplished, not easily rattled. I had stood on TEDx stages and told thousands of people that survival was a form of resistance. I had stared down boardrooms full of skeptical men and told them why my shelter mattered. I had signed six-figure grants and cried in parking lots when kids I barely knew found safe homes. I had done everything they told me I couldn't. And yet, one voicemail from the woman who left me behind like trash on a summer sidewalk still made my hands shake. 3 days passed before I got another call. This time, it wasn't Caroline. It was a name I never expected to see again. Elliot. My brother. Half-brother, technically, but those distinctions stop mattering when you've been abandoned by the same people. Elliot was older, 7 years my senior, and had left home the moment he turned 18. I hadn't spoken to him in 15 years. I hadn't even known where he lived. But there he was, calling from a Tennessee area code I didn't recognize. I let it ring once, twice. Then I answered. "Hello?" My voice was low, wary. "Maren," he said, and for a moment, just hearing my name and his voice cracked something open. "It's me." I closed my eyes. "I know." There was silence. Then, "They told me you wouldn't pick up." "They were almost right," he sighed. "I know I don't deserve to ask you for anything, but they're in trouble." I laughed, dry and sharp. "And let me guess, you're the messenger? The guilt grenade they sent to make me feel bad enough to save them?" He didn't deny it. Instead, he said, "Dad's been diagnosed with early-onset dementia. He's only 63, but it's progressing fast. Caroline, Mom, she's unraveling. They lost the house. She maxed out credit cards trying to cover medical bills, and now collectors are circling like vultures. They don't have anyone, Maren." "They had someone," I snapped. "They had me. Until they left me at a fairground to prove a point." Elliot went quiet. When he finally spoke again, his voice cracked. "I didn't know they did that too. You?" I felt tears press behind my eyes, hot and traitorous. "You didn't want to know." "You're right," he whispered. "I didn't. I left because I couldn't take it anymore. I didn't realize how bad it had gotten for you." The words hung in the air like smoke. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to reach through the phone and shake him, demand why he hadn't taken me with him when he left, why he hadn't come back for me, why I had to survive that house alone. But I didn't, because the truth was, I already knew the answer. We had both been children in a war zone with no map. And when you've been taught survival above all else, sometimes all you can do is save yourself. "I'm not coming back," I said finally. "If they need help, they can apply for Medicaid. They can contact local agencies. But I'm not their daughter anymore. I'm not their insurance policy. I'm not the redemption arc they're trying to buy with my empathy." "I get it," he said. "But you should know. They're going public." I blinked. "What?" "They've been telling people you abandoned them, that you made millions off your charity and left your ailing parents in the gutter. There's a Facebook post. It's already being shared. Caroline's calling church people, old neighbors. They're spinning the story fast, Marin." Of course they were. They always knew how to twist pain into performance, how to weaponize victimhood the second their control slipped. I could practically see it. A photo of them standing outside a foreclosed house, looking frail and sad. A caption about the cruel daughter who changed after she got rich. A link to my organization's website, thrown in for good measure. Felt my stomach turn. It wasn't just personal anymore. They were coming for my reputation, my work, my credibility. And they were using the very narrative I had spent my life reclaiming, the story of survival, as ammunition to destroy me. "Let them," I said, but my voice was steel now. "Are you sure?" Elliot asked quietly. I was. Because the girl they left at the fair may have waited, may have hoped. But the woman I'd become, she wasn't waiting for permission to defend herself. "Tell them this," I said slowly. "If they want to play this game, they better be ready for what happens next, because I'm not the one who should be ashamed." I hung up before he could respond, and then I opened my laptop. I knew exactly how to fight back. With facts, with truth, with my voice. If they thought they could control the story, they forgot one thing. I write my own. The email hit my inbox just after sunrise. Subject line: "Urgent clarification needed. Allegations surfacing." It came from one of our biggest donors, a legacy foundation based in Denver that had supported Haven's housing initiative since our second year in operation. The body of the message was measured, polite, but behind every line I could hear the same thing: fear, hesitation, doubt. "Marin, we've come across several concerning posts circulating on social media. We were surprised to see your name mentioned alongside accusations of financial exploitation and familial abandonment. We're hoping this is a misunderstanding, but the board has requested a written explanation by the end of the week." I stared at the words, the screen suddenly too bright. My chest tightened as I scrolled further. Attached were screenshots, posts from anonymous accounts, barely a week old, filled with calculated half-truths. Myron Holloway, founder of Haven, preaches about saving victims while leaving her own parents in squalor. A multi-millionaire who built her empire off pity, yet can't spare a dollar for her sick father. They gave her everything, and she gave them silence. Underneath, the comment section buzzed like a wasp nest. "Isn't it always the ones who look perfect on the outside? Wow, how can someone be so cold to their own blood?" Another fake feminist building her brand on fake trauma. It felt like a punch to the gut. Not because any of it was true, but because it wasn't just strangers whispering anymore. It was organized. It was precise. And it was working. I closed the email, my hands trembling slightly as I reached for my phone. 3 missed calls. 1 from Vivian. 2 from numbers I didn't recognize. I opened my texts. Another message from Elliot. "They're not stopping." Mom called everyone she knows. She's contacting local reporters. Says you owe them truth and justice. She's weaponizing your silence. Weaponizing. That word stuck with me. Because for 2 decades, my silence had been armor, a boundary, a way to live without constantly bleeding from old wounds. But now? Now it was a weapon they were aiming right at my head, and worse, my reputation. I wasn't naive. I knew the world loved a downfall story, especially when it came to women who had clawed their way to power, especially women like me who had dared to turn pain into purpose. They weren't just trying to humiliate me. They were trying to erase everything I had built. I stood up from my desk, heart pounding, and called an emergency meeting with my PR team. An hour later, the conference room was packed. My communications director, Jamal, sat across from me, his tablet open to the posts in question. He looked up, concern etched deep into his face. "This is coordinated," he said. "Someone's feeding these accounts. It's not just viral, it's strategic." I nodded. "It's my parents." A murmur spread through the room. I saw the discomfort ripple like a stone tossed in water. They didn't want this. No one wanted to deal with the messiness of family drama spilling into boardrooms. But I wasn't here to make anyone comfortable. "I want to go public," I said. Jamal blinked. "You mean, tell your side?" "No," I said, standing. "I mean, tell the truth." I turned to face the rest of the team. For years, I've helped others escape abuse. I've built my life around giving people safety, dignity, and hope. But I've never told them the full story of why I started Haven. I was too afraid. I didn't want pity. I didn't want headlines. I wanted to earn everything I built without dragging my past behind me. But now? I paused, taking a breath. Now they've dragged it out for me. And if I stay quiet, I let them define the narrative. I let them rewrite my story. There was silence. Then Jamal nodded. "Okay, so what do you want to say?" I exhaled slowly, feeling something in me. Steady. I want to say that I was left at a county fair when I was 15, that I waited until sunset before I realized they weren't coming back, that I walked 5 miles to the nearest bus stop and never looked back, that I started Haven because I knew what it felt like to be discarded, that I built this place not in spite of my past, but because of it. Jamal tapped the side of his tablet, thinking. "We'll need a video. You speaking directly to the camera. No edits, no filters, just truth." I nodded. "And I want the caption to read, 'This is my story, not theirs.'" By the end of the day, we had everything ready. The video went live on every platform: Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube. Within an hour, it had over 300,000 views. By midnight, 2.4 million, and with every share, every comment, I felt the weight lift just a little. She's brave for speaking out. Her story made me cry. I've lived this too. Thank you, Marin, for reminding us that healing doesn't require silence. I hadn't expected the outpouring. I hadn't expected the solidarity. But most of all, I hadn't expected the peace. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't hiding. I wasn't surviving. I was standing. And if you've ever been made to feel small by people who were supposed to protect you, know this: your voice is power. Your story is yours, and no one, not even the people who raised you, gets to take that away. If this part of the story lit something inside you, drop a comment and let me know. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Because trust me, what happens next? You're going to want to see it. The fallout came fast, and it came hard. The morning after I published my video, the air in the office felt charged, like static clinging to the edges of every conversation. I walked in to quiet nods from my staff, some of whom couldn't even meet my eyes. I didn't blame them. My story was raw, messy, and most of all, it was real. By noon, media outlets had picked up the story. The headline variations were endless. CEO reveals childhood trauma in viral confession. Maren Holloway breaks silence on her parents' abuse. The truth behind Haven's founder. Some praised my bravery. Others called it a publicity stunt. But the worst reactions didn't come from strangers. They came from my own blood. At 3:42 p.m., I received a single email. No subject line, no greeting, just one sentence. You'll pay for humiliating us. It was signed, of course, by my father. I sat there staring at those 8 words, the cursor, blinking in silent accusation. But there was no fear left in me. Only fury, cold and clean, because here's the truth they couldn't accept. I wasn't theirs to control anymore. Not 5 minutes later, Jenny, my assistant, knocked on the door. She looked shaken. "They're here," she said. "Your parents. They're downstairs." My breath caught. "I told security to hold them at the entrance, but your mother, she's making a scene." I stood slowly, my body taut with restraint. I walked down the hall toward the lobby, every step echoing like a countdown. When the elevator doors opened, I was met with chaos. Celeste Holloway was standing at the front desk, her voice shrill with faux heartbreak. "I just want to see my daughter," she cried, as if we were starring in some melodrama for daytime television. "She's been brainwashed by money and fame." People stared. Phones were out. Cameras were rolling. And next to her, Magnus, my father, stood with arms folded like a man ready to strike. His gaze met mine the moment I stepped into the space, and something in his expression turned smug. Like he still thought he had power. Here, like he believed he could drag me back into submission. I stepped forward. "I gave you a chance to leave this quietly," I said, my voice low and even. "You declined, so here we are." My mother turned to me with crocodile tears in her eyes. "Maren, please. We're your family." "Don't," I snapped. "Don't pretend this is about love. You left me. You used me. And now you're trying to ruin me." Magnus scoffed. "You're ungrateful. We taught you to be strong, and now you act like a victim?" "No," I said, staring him down. "You taught me how to survive hell, and I'm not pretending. I was a victim, but I'm not anymore." Celeste's voice dropped into something venomous. "You really want the world to believe this is who we are?" I leaned in slightly, meeting her gaze. "They already do." She flinched. Magnus's jaw tightened. "We raised you." "No," I said. "You raised a version of me you thought you could control. But I grew up without your permission. And I built a life without your help." A long silence fell. Then Magnus took a step closer, his voice barely a whisper. "We're not done." But before I could respond, someone else stepped between us. Jamal. He raised a hand toward my parents. "You need to leave. This is a place of business, not a theater." Magnus sneered. "Who are you?" Jamal didn't blink. "The person who protects her now." Security stepped in. My parents were escorted out, still muttering threats under their breath, still trying to salvage their pride in front of a dozen phones capturing every second. Back in my office, I collapsed. Into my chair, the adrenaline slowly draining. Jamal stepped inside and closed the door. "You okay?" I nodded. "They're losing control. That makes them dangerous." "Want to pull the plug on the campaign?" "No," I said immediately. "We double down. We protect what we built. We tell the truth louder." He nodded once, and we both knew this wasn't over. Later that night, I checked my email again. Hundreds of messages poured in, some from strangers, others from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Former classmates, distant cousins, colleagues who'd seen the video and finally understood what had shaped me. One message stood out. It was from a woman named Cheryl in Idaho. She wrote, "I left my parents too. Everyone told me I was cold, ungrateful, cruel. But hearing your story made me realize I wasn't alone. Thank you for choosing yourself. It gave me permission to do the same. I read it 3 times. Then I cried for the first time in days. Not because I was sad, but because finally, after years of isolation, guilt, silence, I wasn't alone either. By the time the summons arrived, I should have been prepared. But nothing truly braces you for the moment your parents declare war, not just on your peace, but on your name, your livelihood, your very existence. The letter came in a thick manila envelope, hand-delivered, like something sacred. Like they wanted to make sure I felt it the moment it hit my hands. I didn't open it right away. I sat there at my desk, the summer sun bleeding gold through the blinds, casting long shadows across the floor. Shadows that reminded me of my past. Always. Looming. Always stretching. When I finally tore the seal, the words inside didn't just sting. They sliced. Magnus and Celeste Holloway versus Marin Holloway. They were suing me. Not just for defamation, not for slander. They were suing me for financial abandonment, for negligence of filial duty, claiming I had a legal obligation to provide for them in their old age. The same people who had once left me behind at a gas station like I was some stray dog. The same people who hadn't called me in 2 decades unless they needed something. Now, they wanted a piece of my life. My money, my company, my peace. I paced my office, the letter clutched in one hand, my phone in the other. My lawyer, David, answered on the second ring. I got it, I said before he could speak. There was a long pause on his end. We knew. This might happen, he said, voice calm, composed. It's a long shot for them legally. Texas isn't strict about these kinds of claims, but if it goes public, if it drags out, it'll hurt your business. That word again. Business. What about my sanity? What about the years I fought just to feel like I belonged to myself? I let out a long breath, staring at the framed quote above my desk. Something I'd printed in college, long before Haven existed. It read, "You do not owe your abuser closure, comfort, or a second chance." I nodded to no one. Then we fight, I said, and this time, I wouldn't be fighting for survival. I'd be fighting for justice. The next day, I did something I never imagined myself doing. I went back to the gas station. Yes, that gas station. The one off the highway in rural Alabama, the place where 16-year-old me stood barefoot on hot asphalt with a bottle of lukewarm water, watching her parents' car disappear over the horizon. It looked the same. Faded. Forgotten. A place that had become the backdrop of my origin story. I stood there, hands in my pockets, breathing in the thick, humid air, and let the memories wash over me like rain on concrete. But this time, they didn't drown me. They didn't weaken me. They reminded me just how far I had come. When I returned to Austin, I posted a photo of the station to my social media. No caption, no explanation, just a place, a moment, a silent monument to what they did. Within minutes, the internet lit up again. People knew, and they cared. Because truth has gravity, and mine had finally become undeniable. But my parents weren't done. No, their next move was pure scorched earth. They leaked private emails, falsified documents, even doctored voice memos where they spliced my words to sound cold, heartless, conniving. Marin admits she planned to cut them off financially, one headline read. She calls them a burden, another claimed. I laughed when I saw it. Sharp, bitter, exhausted. Because they really believed they could erase 2 decades of silence and replace it with lies. What they didn't know was this. I had receipts too. Dozens of texts, voicemails, letters, evidence of manipulation, of neglect, of threats. I had proof of the years they tried to shame me into compliance. I dropped it all, publicly, with a statement that ended with, I don't share this out of revenge. I share it so no one ever thinks they're alone in surviving their own family. The backlash on them was swift and brutal. Family friends unfriended them. Their church community, once their shield, turned cold. Even Vivian stopped returning their calls. It didn't stop them from trying, though. The morning of our court hearing, they stood outside the courthouse steps giving statements to the press. She was always a difficult child, my mother sobbed, clutching her pearls like some Southern martyr. We just wanted to help her grow up strong. My father nodded grimly beside her. Tough love, that's what it was. But inside that courtroom, the judge didn't see strength. He saw a trail of abuse and abandonment a mile long. He saw me, not the villain in their fantasy, but the survivor, the adult woman who had clawed her way out of a grave her own parents had dug for her. By the end of the hearing, the judge dismissed the case. There is no legal foundation, he said. And frankly, there is no moral one either. Celeste collapsed into the courtroom bench. Magnus clenched his jaw but said nothing. I stood. I didn't gloat. I didn't sneer. I just walked past them, head held high. Because I wasn't angry anymore. Was free. The day after the court hearing, I thought it would all be over. I believed that the verdict would be the end of their campaign, that they would finally disappear into the shadows they came from. But what I didn't anticipate was how far people will go when they've built their identity on controlling you, and when that identity begins to crumble. I was in the middle of a client presentation when Jenny barged into the conference room, her face pale. She held her phone out to me with trembling fingers. You need to see this, she whispered, ignoring the stares from board members seated around us. I took the phone and scrolled. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then, I saw the name on the page. Mine. A blog post. No, a hit piece. The Truth About Marin Holloway was the title, written by an anonymous contributor who claimed to be a concerned family member. It was a carefully crafted narrative of fiction, laced with just enough half-truths to sound believable. It painted me as cold, vindictive, mentally unstable. It detailed alleged childhood incidents where I was violent, manipulative, rebellious. And most damning of all, it claimed that Haven Developments was built off of stolen money. I could hardly breathe. The post had already been shared over 10,000 times. The comments were pouring in. I knew there was something off about her, and she looks fake. This is what happens when you give narcissists power. One user even claimed I had bullied my own sister into silence for years. The truth? I had been silent. But not because I was the bully, because I had been too busy surviving. I excused myself from the conference room without a word. My team followed, me into my office, their eyes filled with concern. We're handling the PR fallout, my head of communications said. But, Marin, this is coordinated. Someone is feeding these lies. I already knew who it was. I had underestimated how far my parents would go. Even after a courtroom humiliation, they refused to let go of the leash they no longer held. They didn't want justice. They wanted a legacy, a narrative that painted them as the victims of an ungrateful daughter. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was war, and they were dragging every inch of my life into the spotlight. I stared out the window for a long time, my reflection dimmed by the afternoon light. I had spent so long building myself into someone who couldn't be touched. Polished, controlled, always in control. But even steel bends when pushed hard enough, and I was bending. My phone buzzed again. It was Vivian. I didn't want to answer, but I did. Marin, she said, her voice tight. Have you seen? Yes, she hesitated. I didn't know. They were planning this, I swear. I didn't speak. I've been trying to reason with them. But Mom, she's different now. Obsessed. She keeps saying you need to be put in your place. I closed my eyes, a tremor in my hands. They're not going to stop, are they? No, Vivian said softly. They're not. Not until you break." The line went quiet, but neither of us hung up. Finally, she added, "I know I've never protected you. Not when we were kids. Not when they left you at that gas station. But I'm here now, if you need me." It was the first time in years she'd admitted what happened, and it hit harder than I expected. I whispered, "Why now?" She paused. "Because now I'm scared of them too." That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind played out every cruel comment I'd read that day, every piece of manufactured scandal, every ounce of hate aimed at me from strangers who only knew the version of me my parents had designed. I sat in my apartment, the one I had earned, the one I had bought with sleepless nights and endless hustle, and I asked myself a question I hadn't dared voice since I was 16. What if they win? Not in court, but in reputation, in legacy, in the story they leave behind. Because that's what this was about for them. They weren't fighting for truth. They were fighting for ownership of the story. And the longer I stayed quiet, the more powerful their version became. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to just defend myself anymore. I was going to take back the story. I recorded a video. Just me. No makeup, no studio, no PR filters. Just my voice, my truth. "I'm not here to change your mind," I said into the lens. "I'm not here to convince you I'm a good person. I'm here because I'm tired of being afraid of people who stopped deserving my silence a long time ago." I told the story from the beginning, the gas station, the years of emotional abuse, the manipulations, the courtroom, the lies. I cried halfway through, but I didn't stop. I ended with this. My parents raised me to believe that pain was love, and silence was survival. But silence isn't survival, it's surrender. And I'm done surrendering. I posted it at midnight. By dawn, it had been shared 3 million times. Support flooded in like a dam had broken. Other survivors, estranged sons and daughters, people who had spent their lives being painted as villains in stories they never got to write. For the first time, I wasn't alone. The video changed everything, but not in the way I expected. The morning after it went live, I woke up to a storm. My inbox was full. Hundreds of messages, some from strangers, some from people I hadn't spoken to in years, some from journalists. But one thing united them all. People were talking. The silence that had once shielded my parents, the carefully curated version of them they paraded around, was cracking wide open. At first, I felt relief, like I could breathe again. But relief has a short lifespan when you're dealing with people who thrive on control. Less than 24 hours after I told the truth, they launched their next attack. This time, it wasn't online. It was personal. I was walking into my office building, coffee in hand, when I saw the crowd. Protesters. Real ones. Hired? Manipulated? Loyal? I didn't know. All I saw were signs with my name plastered on them, twisted into slogans like "Support your parents" and "Family before fortune." Some even had my face printed beneath bold all-caps labels. Liar, ingrate, daughter from hell. It took everything in me not to flinch. Security rushed to meet me at the front doors. "We've got extra staff on standby," one of them said quietly. "It's been escalating since last night. You might want to leave through the service entrance for a while." But I didn't turn around. I walked through those doors, spine straight, heart thudding, past the chants and the cameras and the people shouting my name like it belonged to them. Inside, the building was quieter, but only barely. Tension hung in the air. I could feel it in the way my staff greeted me, more careful, more distant. Even the ones who supported me didn't know what to say. I didn't blame them. The air around me was charged now, volatile, like a lightning storm waiting to hit ground. I made it to my office and closed the door behind me. The moment I did, Jenny followed me in. "You need to see this," she said again, handing me a manila folder. Her face was pale. I opened it. Inside were printed screenshots. A leak, not from the internet, from my private emails, my text messages, financial records. I scanned the pages, my breath catching. "They got into your cloud," Jenny whispered. "I've already called IT. We're launching a full internal audit." I stared at the page in front of me. An old email. From 5 years ago. A late-night message I sent to a therapist. One line stood out. "Sometimes I think they were right. Maybe I was too difficult to love." I felt like vomiting. "They're trying to destroy you emotionally," Jenny said softly. And for the first time in years, I felt it. The edge. The place where a person either breaks or burns brighter. I had walked that tightrope for 2 decades. I wasn't about to fall now. I looked up at her. "Get me a press conference." Jenny blinked. "Maren, are you sure?" "Set it up." That night, the auditorium was packed. It wasn't just media. It was people, followers, critics, curious, onlookers drawn by the fire of a public meltdown, or what they thought would be one. I walked onto the stage with my heart in my throat and no script in my hand. "My name is Maren Holloway," I began. "And for years I've lived in fear of people who claim to love me." A murmur rippled through the room. I held up one of the leaked emails. "Yes, this is mine. Yes, I wrote those words. I doubted myself. I thought I was the problem. But here's the thing about abusers. They're masters at making you question your own reality." I paused, letting the weight of it settle. "I'm not here to beg for your sympathy. I'm here because silence enables abuse. And I won't be silent anymore." I told them what it was like to be 16 and stranded at a gas station. I told them what it was like to build something from nothing, with no handouts, no support, just grit and survival instincts. I told them what it meant to be hunted by the very people who gave you life, not out of love, but out of entitlement. When I was done, the room was still. Then someone stood, then another, then another. Applause erupted. Not loud, not frenzied, but steady. Real. Later that night, back in my apartment, I sat on the floor in silence. I hadn't cried through the entire press conference, but now, in the quiet, tears slipped down my cheeks. Not from sadness, from exhaustion, from finally letting go of the fear. My phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Then, another. Then Vivian, I answered. "I saw the press conference," she said. Her voice was soft, reverent. "I had no idea how much you were still carrying." "I didn't either," I said quietly. She was silent for a moment. "I think they're finally backing down, for real this time." I didn't respond. "They're scared," she added. "Not because of what you said, but because people finally believed you." And that was it. That was the truth. The story wasn't about villains and heroes anymore. It was about truth. And who was brave enough to tell it? I don't know what comes next. Maybe they'll try again. Maybe they'll disappear. Forever. But one thing is certain. I won't go back. This isn't just a story about a family gone wrong. It's a story about what happens when one woman refuses to carry a legacy that was never hers to bear. The days after the press conference were a blur of headlines, reactions, and silence. The kind of silence that only follows a storm so deafening, even the echoes forget how to return. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt still. And in that stillness, for the first time in my life, I was able to hear my own voice again. Not the voice they tried to bury beneath guilt, beneath manipulation, beneath shame, but my voice. The one I had silenced for years just to survive in a house that never felt like home. I stood by the tall windows of my office, watching the skyline shimmer beneath dusk's gold. The city hadn't changed, but I had. And it wasn't. Because people finally saw me. It was because I had finally decided to stop hiding. The lawsuit was dropped 3 days after the press conference. Not with an apology, not with a retraction, just silence. The kind of silence that comes from losing the only weapon they had left, control. But the damage had already been done. Not to me, to them. Their narrative had unraveled. Their public image, a facade held together by decades of careful deception, was gone. What replaced it was something they couldn't spin or bury: the truth. I didn't celebrate. I didn't pop champagne. I simply closed my laptop and went home. That night, I lit a candle in the kitchen, poured myself a glass of wine, and pulled out a box I hadn't opened in years. Inside were old journals, scraps of dreams I had written when I was 16, pages inked with pain, hope, desperation, and fire. I flipped to one entry written the day after they left me behind at that gas station. I don't think I matter to anyone, but maybe one day I'll matter to myself. And that was the difference now. I did matter. To myself. No one had to choose me anymore. I had chosen me. The following weekend, I met Aunt Mela for dinner. She had tears in her eyes when she saw me. She pulled me in tight and whispered, "I knew you'd rise, Marin, but I didn't know you'd soar." For dessert, we ordered 2 slices of strawberry cake, the same kind she used to sneak into my room when I cried myself to sleep at 14. We didn't talk about the lawsuit, or the posts, or the spectacle. We talked about books, about a pottery class she'd signed up for, about the quiet strength it takes to walk away from people you're taught to love, even when they never loved you the right way. That evening, on the drive home, I passed the street I grew up on. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. I just glanced at it in the rearview mirror, a place that used to define me now reduced to a shadow I had long since outgrown. Back at home, I stood on my balcony, the city pulsing beneath me. I had spent years building a life out of the ashes, of someone else's choices. But this was mine. Not inherited, not borrowed, not bought through guilt or obligation. Mine. It's easy to think stories like this end with justice. But the truth is, justice doesn't always come wrapped in apologies or redemption arcs. Sometimes, justice is simply reclaiming the space they tried to erase you from. Sometimes it's surviving the very people who raised you. And sometimes it's standing alone in the dark and realizing you're no longer afraid of it. So let me tell you something from the other side of the fire. Survival is not weakness. Walking away is not selfish. Choosing your peace over someone else's dysfunction is not cruelty. It's healing. For so long, I believed that love meant sacrifice, that I had to earn the affection of people who made me feel invisible. But here's the truth. Love without respect is just manipulation dressed in familiarity. And family without accountability is just tradition weaponized as a prison. You owe no one your suffering. Not your parents, not your siblings, not anyone who demands your silence as proof of your loyalty. You deserve a life that doesn't require you to shrink. You deserve a story that isn't written by the people who tried to erase you. And if you're reading this thinking, that sounds like me, then let this be your sign. It's okay to start over. It's okay to walk away, even if it means walking alone for a while. It's okay to choose yourself, because choosing yourself isn't betrayal. It's survival. It's your first act of freedom. So if this story hit something deep in you, if it reminded you of the battles you've fought in silence, the boundaries you've tried to draw but couldn't hold, or the family you're trying to love from a distance, drop a 1 in the comments. Or tell me where you're watching from. I want to hear your story. And if you want more stories like this, raw, real, and filled with the kind of truth we were never taught to speak, go ahead and subscribe. Because we're just getting started. And trust me, there's more where this came from. You're not alone anymore. You never were. You just needed someone to say it first. And now I have. So go. Choose you. Always.